Okay, before we get started, I'd like to talk to you about something just for a second. Since last Tuesday, there have been a lot of people who have asked me about what's going on here with us as alcoholics and addicts in recovery and following a spiritual way of life. What about this business of love and tolerance is our code for everyone? And how do we square that with the idea? How do we square that with the idea that we need to do something drastic about the people who are attacking us? It's really not that difficult. And that there is no conflict. We have been given by God 3 natural instincts. The instincts for sex and security and society. And these instincts are God-given and therefore good. Our instinct for security is such that we are to protect ourselves. It is to ensure the safety of ourselves and those who depend upon us. And if we are attacked, we are to defend ourselves. There isn't the slightest bit of difference. If you are a woman, if you can imagine being in your home and somebody comes in threatening to rape or kill you, or to steal from you, to burn your house down. You may feel as if this person is benighted, maybe crazy. You may have all kinds of empathy for them, but you sure as heck are not going to let them get away with it if you can stop it, and by whatever means. And we're going to be doing the same thing. There's a spiritual maxim involved here, guys. We are not permitted to harm another human being. But likewise, we do not allow others to harm us. Because if we do, that harm is sure to block us from God. There's something else involved here too. Our relationship with God is on an extremely personal basis. We have turned our lives and our will over to Him. And if we're working a program and we are being disciplined and consistent about it, we're in touch with God throughout the day, many times. Not only that, but we have put our trust and faith in Him. Our responsibility is to stay close to Him and to perform His work well. So if we concentrate on doing that, and if we concentrate on the idea that we are to carry His message wherever we can, we're going to be just fine. But it is imperative for us to understand that we have the absolute right to defend ourselves. And that's what we're going to be doing. And I pray to God that this country pulls together, forgets all of the things that divide us, and that we attack this as one person, one people. Those who have assaulted us don't read history. They don't remember or know what happened right after Pearl Harbor. This country came together as one within a very short time, days. And although we were in mortal danger, Franklin Roosevelt, our president, put it just right. He said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. They made a terrible mistake, these people. They thought they could divide us and confuse us, and just the opposite is happening. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you because it has been something on my mind and on the minds of many. And I hope that if you've been confused about it, that perhaps that might be helpful. We're going to be looking at the 5th step which begins, if you have your big book, on page 72. This is the first part of the 6th chapter, entitled Into Action. What do we suppose that means? It certainly does not mean sitting around channel surfing or waiting for good things to happen. It means precisely what it says. We are going to get into action. I'd like to make sure before we get into the full-scale discussion of the 5th step that we clear up some misunderstandings. There are people who love to play semantic games, and so they will try to make a distinction between the exact nature of our wrongs and defects of character and shortcomings and all of the other words which are used to describe precisely the same thing. Perhaps they do not realize that Bill Wilson, in his writing, would always use a synonym if he could. He did not like to repeat himself. The 5th step is for us to admit to ourselves, to God, to another human being, the exact nature of our defects of character. That is the exact nature of the insanity which we brought in here with us, which is the product of our fears which have warped and perverted our natural God-given instincts. This is part of our job. This is part of the task which we assumed when we did the 3rd step, and we said to God, if you will do these things for me, then I promise you, I commit myself to go forward with the rest of these steps and to find out what it is that blocks me from you. Not only the defects of character and the insanities, but also the guilt and remorse and shame which I've brought upon myself and my actions which harmed other people. And the first thing I'm committing myself to do is to find out exactly what all these things are. And that's what I did when I did my 4th step. We spent 4 weeks on the 4th step, you and I, and we explored that step in depth. And I hope that those of you who have been here have realized just how powerful that step is and just how searching is that inventory. And that as a result of working that inventory, we now have no doubt what it is that is wrong with us. That is, what are those things which are keeping us from communion with our higher power, communion with God. Now it is our turn to not only have written all of these things down, but we now are to articulate them. We are to say them out loud. This is not something that was dreamed up by Bill Wilson and the others. This whole idea of admission to another human being. This goes back into antiquity. We can find references to this very highly spiritual principle in all the writings. For example, in the letter to the Ephesians, Paul told them, you are to confess your faults one to another. So we're looking at something here which has enormous spiritual significance. I don't know why that should be. All I know is that it's true. That something happens, something major happens when we, instead of having kept these things to ourselves and having assumed that already God knows about us anyway, we have to sit down face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and admit these things to another person. There's something that happens there which is indeed miraculous. And is it something which we need to do? Well, why do we need to do it? Well, the short answer to that is that if we don't do it, we won't recover. And I guess that's about as strong as you need to get. Why? Well, because we have not completed our house cleaning. We have not done those things which we committed ourselves to do. And we have not prepared ourselves to go to God with the problems that we found. In the beginning, as we walked in the door and as we began to read the big book and we began to be cognizant of what was actually going on with us, we realized that we were powerless. The very nature of the first step deals specifically with that one subject, that you and I are powerless to stop using these things which are killing us, no matter how much we may wish to do so, no matter how strong we may be in other aspects of our lives. We cannot stop on our own. We are powerless. And when we come in here, we learn very quickly that this program offers a solution to that powerlessness, and we call it 12 steps. And it is through those steps that we're going to gain the power we need by doing one thing, by finding and surrendering to the God of our own understanding. Not only surrendering, but seeking knowledge of His will for us, power to carry that out, and then being obedient to His will, and continue to do this for the rest of our lives. And when we do that, what happens is that we get into God's pocket and we stay there. We have God's armor on us. We are released from the hold of the alcohol and the drugs. Period. They can't touch us. Now, in order for all of this to happen, we have to be free of the things which block us off from God. Remember, going back to the third step, we repeat this at almost every meeting because it's so important to keep in mind. This is the basic stuff. God will give us everything we need, but we must stay close to Him, and we must perform His work well. Now, we are not yet close to God. We have not yet entered the world of the Spirit. We have not yet become God conscious, because we still have work to do. And one of the things we must do is we must sit down and admit what it is that we've found about ourselves, which has been killing us, which has been causing all of our failures, this cancer within us, these natural instincts that have been warped and perverted by fear, this insanity, which means that our minds have not been working right for a long time. We need to admit all these things. When we have done that, we will then be ready to go to God and ask Him to take away these things which we have found, these defects of character. And we will be ready for that to happen 100%. Because when we do our fifth step, we're going to be examining these defects. We're going to be examining in detail, in widescreen, Technicolor, Stereophonic, and Dolby, exactly what these things have been doing to us all our lives. And we're going to realize that we can no longer abide any of them, no matter how used to them we may have become. No matter how we may have felt at one time that these were survival mechanisms. That's a bunch of baloney. They have never been survival mechanisms. They have been the cancer killing us, killing off our relationships, killing off our resolve, eating us alive from the inside out. And we're going to see that when we do our fifth step. Furthermore, when we did our fourth step and our third step, we found out that we were powerless over these things. We found out that we could not get rid of self on our own. We had to have God's help. We found out that we couldn't get rid of resentments on our own. We couldn't wish them away any more than alcohol. We had to have God's help. We found out that these fears that were tearing us apart were products of our mind. They were phantoms, that we manufactured these things ourselves. We were the source of our own fears. And that we couldn't cure a sick mind with a sick mind. And that we had to have God's help to be free of our fears. And we were given the formula for doing that. Likewise, we found out about our dishonesty. That we found out that we were never dishonest except when we were afraid of the results of being honest. So again, it was fear. And we found out that fear was the progenitor of all of our defects of character. I was speaking to somebody just before the meeting. Pride is the godfather of our defects, but fear is the hitman. Pride sends fear out to destroy us. And fear is our enemy. It may be our only enemy. And as Franklin Roosevelt said, it's the only thing we have to be afraid of is the fear that eats us alive from inside out. This being the case, then, you can see that this fifth step is crucial, because we must come to not only understand these things, we may have already begun to understand this in the fourth step, but we got to say it. We got to say it out loud. Yes, 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 I see what these defects are doing to me. I see what this insanity is doing to me. Yes, 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 it's true. I can't get rid of these things myself. I'm powerless over these things. And remember when we took our second step, what we came to believe? That God could restore us to sanity. Well, we got to put that belief to work, hadn't we? And so our fifth step is going to lead us inexorably to our sixth and seventh steps. And as much as our fifth step depends upon our fourth step, it leads directly to our sixth and seventh and eighth and ninth steps. Not only that, but what are we learning here as we do our fifth step? We're learning that we not only must, but we can admit to others what's going on with us. How important is that? Look at the 10th step. Look at the 11th step. In both of those steps, we are directed that when some of these defects come up, we talk to somebody about them, we admit them, and we do it promptly. We would never have thought of doing that before. But by doing our fourth step and our fifth step, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, we have added all of these survival tools, these spiritual tools. And they have become a part of us, and we know now that they work. By the time we get to the 10th step, we have learned how to use these tools. And we have learned that we can work them, that when we do use them, that they work for us, and that what the big book tells us about them is the truth. So let's take a look now on page 72. Beginning with the first paragraph. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. We have admitted certain defects. Notice, does not use the word wrongs here, use the word defects advisedly. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. It doesn't say that they're going to be hanging around and, oh gee golly whiz, only some of them may be taken, but the rest will hang around and got to suffer with them the rest of your life. That's all such total nonsense. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the fifth step in the program of recovery. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. And wow, that can be a problem, you know. A lot of folks are kind of hanging back from doing their fourth step because they know that fifth step is coming. I'm actually going to have to sit down and talk to somebody about this stuff I've been hiding and running from all my life. Wow, I don't think I can do that. We think we've done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. Of course, that's in the fourth step, isn't it? There's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person. We see a good reason why we should do so. The best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome. Now, that's soft pedaling the truth. The truth we find at the bottom of page 73. Just look over the next page, please. Last sentence. See what it says. We must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. Can't get more direct than that. Having persevered with the rest of the program, he wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. Now you see what's happening here is that though we have inventoried these things, and in private we have admitted to ourselves that these defects are ruinous, they're killing us, and that we can't get rid of them ourselves, until we actually say that out loud, we can go back to the old game again, which is denial and self-delusion and putting it off and procrastinating and saying it's not that important, and before long we rationalize ourselves right out of recovery. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. Notice that emphasis is placed here on egoism. And of course we know that the ego has to be smashed. Ego, in the sense that we're talking about here, does not just mean self as the Greek would mean. It is the pejorative. We're talking about the overwhelming narcissistic approach to life, which means that we are the center of the universe, that we are the general managers of the universe, whether you like it or not. And fear. Notice that fear is highlighted here. They only thought they had humbled themselves. Humility, of course, is something which Bill stressed constantly, as did Father Ed Dowling. Ed thought that we only got humble if we were humiliated. Some of us don't think that that concept has any application, but that was his concept. And in some ways, Bill seemed to have bought into it. Of course, Father Ed was not a member, but he was a Jesuit priest who was, for 20 years, was Bill Wilson's closest confidant. There's a wonderful book out, which is a consistent in part of the letters back and forth between the two. But in any event, humility here becomes, again, a major factor in recovery. Now, this next sentence puts a kibosh on some nonsense that floats around here, that somehow or another there are principles behind the steps. You can't have a principle behind a principle. The steps are the principles are the steps. The literature stresses this over and over again. Not only the big book, but the forward to the 12 and 12. But beyond that, some of the so-called principles behind the steps, which are supposed to be found in earlier steps, now we find where they really come into play. Let's see what this says. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. Now please notice the word learned. That's the same word that's used on page 30. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. Here again, the word learned is used advisedly. It means that we come to know, that we are taught, that we are given these things as a result of the efforts that we have expended. We learn our humility. We learn our fearlessness. We learn our honesty when we tell someone else our life story. These things are the products of the fourth and the fifth step. They are not things which we force upon ourselves. We cannot do that. If I say to you, you be honest, and you ask me, well, how do I do that? I've been lying to myself all my life. I can say to you, well, you can quit telling lies. You say, yeah, that would be a good start. But that only means that I'm not telling lies to you. What happens about I'm still lying to myself? The Big Book makes it quite clear, does it not, that we cannot recover if we are not willing or able to be honest with ourselves. So self-honesty is what is learned here. And how important is it for us to understand that honesty is not a function of the first step or the second or the third step. It starts to kick in the fourth step, and it comes to fruition in the fifth step. In the sense that we find these things necessary to continue with the rest of the steps and to recover from the disease of alcoholism and to enter the world of the Spirit and to become God conscious. That's what these things are necessary for, and here's where we learn them as we do our fifth step. See how important this step is. This is not just something where we sit down and go through some kind of a confession. As cleansing as that may be, and it's wonderful what that will do for us, but it's a Band-Aid, and it doesn't last. There's got to be more to the fifth step than that, and there is. It's a great deal more. Now the Big Book goes into question of what we were before we got here, mostly talking about the deceptions that we played on ourselves and on others, and the fears that came out of our crapped out actions, knowing that we had done these things which were wrong, knowing that we may be discovered as a result of it. Talks about our stage character, that we are very much the actor and actress, that we lead a double life. I think I shared with you that in Beverly Hills as a lawyer I was also a CIA agent in the bars. Why in the hell would I do that? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Wasn't good enough to be a lawyer. I believe, I'm pretty sure I was also a heart surgeon or brain surgeon in another bar. We look back and we can laugh about this stuff, but just think how crazy that is. But this was because I wanted to enjoy a certain reputation, but I knew in my heart I didn't deserve it. And then it goes on to tell us that this inconsistency is made worse by the things we do on our sprees. Coming to our senses, we're revolted at certain episodes we vaguely remember. These memories are a nightmare. We tremble to think someone might have observed us. As fast as we can, we push these memories far inside ourselves. You see now how important this fourth step is, this being very thorough and very honest, to get down and dig this stuff out. We hope they will never see the light of day. We are under constant fear and tension. And it gets into the fact that we've been to see all the shrinks out there and the psychologists who don't quite qualify as shrinks yet, and the counselors who are one step even lower. And they couldn't help us. And one of the reasons they couldn't help us is because we were never honest with them. We're going to tell them the whole truth. Look at this fifth step. We are faced with the proposition that we must be completely honest with one other human being, at least one other person, or else. We're going to take a look at this business of choosing someone with whom to share our fifth step. It's important to realize that when the Big Book was written, and this part of the Big Book was written in the later part of 1938, that there were no sponsors. This whole idea of sponsorship did not come about until in the 40s. Pretty much they sponsored each other in the sense that we're talking about. 12-step work was done one-on-one, but everybody pitched in. Their meetings were meetings with family. They met in the homes. They didn't have all these rules and regulations. Somebody the other day in a meeting got cut off right in the middle of their sharing by an overzealous chairperson who was afraid that group conscience was somehow going to swallow her up if she didn't stop this person right in the middle, because after all they're supposed to stop promptly 5 minutes before the hour. So whatever this lady was going to say never got said. And they didn't have any of that nonsense. And the families were there because they realized that we were dealing here with a family disease. The point here is that they didn't have any sponsor, the sponsorship thing, which has kind of become a cult now around AA, with all of its own built-in mystery and mythology and human solutions and stuff like, you're not ready to work the steps, I'll tell you when you're ready. Or, oh, you want me to be your sponsor? Okay. You go to meetings for 90 days and prove to me that you really want to be here, and then maybe I'll help you. I digress. Forgive me. The point of all of this is that when they were talking about somebody to hear their fifth step, many of these folks were going outside the fellowship to priests and ministers and rabbis and parsons, and even to psychiatrists and other doctors, and I suppose one or two really, really, really brave souls went to a lawyer or two. Wasn't recommended. We don't find it anywhere in the big book. But in any event, it was not that common for them to be giving their fifth steps to someone in the program. As it has developed, however, most of us now do our fifth steps with our sponsor. For one thing, sponsors already become privy to our fourth step, at least the sponsors who know what they're doing, know what's in that fourth step as it goes along. But the principles, the basic ideas here have never changed, that if we're going to reveal the deepest, darkest secrets of our lives, we need to be doing this with somebody we trust, with somebody who has shown us to be that they're trustworthy, somebody who is going to keep our story absolutely inviolate, secret, never to be revealed to another person under any circumstances whatsoever. Some of you know, and this is not to make a hero of me, but only to illustrate what I'm saying. I went to prison because I refused to testify before a federal grand jury. They wanted to ask me questions about conduct of somebody I sponsored. And I had the answers to those questions, but I received them in a fifth step. And so I refused to do it, so they threw me in prison. And I don't think that's right, but nevertheless, that's what happened. If I were to have ratted out that sponsee for whatever reason, I could never face any of you again. I would have been crippled forever from doing any kind of effective work. And I believe that that's my holy mission, that God has brought me here not to save my sorry behind, but because He wanted someone like me to be a spokesman, and like you. We're all here for the same reason. I could not permit myself to be crippled from doing that. And so and I believe that strongly in the sanctity of the fifth step, that I think that the best I can do is to tell you that's how I feel, and I pray to God that those of you who are doing sponsorship now and taking fifth step will feel the same way. The person who looks you in the eye and says, can I trust you, can I tell you what's going on with me, knowing that it will never go any further, needs to have the feeling of comfort that when you say yes you can, that you mean it and it's the truth. And so we need to be very careful about whom we pick. I would suggest to you, if you haven't done a fifth step yet, that you watch the people who you have picked as likely prospect and see what they do. I would suggest strongly to you that if you see someone who does a lot of gossiping around the rooms, you better run like hell from them. Or even someone who listens to gossip. Because if nobody will listen, there can be no gossip, can there? So we're going to know people by their actions, not by their words. And that we, each of us, have our own lives at stake. We each have our own program that we must work. We are each responsible for ourselves. And we cannot permit others to dictate our lives to us. We ask them to help us, but not to dictate. We ask them to help us, but not make us dependent upon them. Dependency in any form other than dependency upon God is a killer for us. And if we allow ourselves to become dependent upon our sponsors, we make a terrible mistake. This is not to say that close relationships don't form, because they do. Some of those relationships have lifetime meaning. Some of the relationships we develop with people we sponsor, or those who sponsor us, are almost the nature of soulmates. And that's wonderful too. But we must always remember that our dependence must be on God, not on other human beings. Another thing that is very important as far as picking a sponsor, let's say somebody here at Fifth Step, suppose you decide that you want to go outside. You want to go down to see Monsignor. And Monsignor is a guy that you trust, and also if you believe that you need to be forgiven, if you believe you're dealing with sins and you're dealing with a religious matter, it's probably the best thing to do is go see Monsignor. Or if it's the rabbi with whom you become very close. But we got to remember that these people need to know what it is we're doing here, because this is not just confession. If this is not just confession. Confession is strong and powerful, but it goes beyond that, because we're looking for very, very specific things. We are looking to articulate what is wrong with us, the things in ourselves which are blocking us from God. We're looking to articulate this in such a way that we can see without any shadow of doubt just what these things have done to us, how dangerous they are, how cancerous they are, how they have ruined our lives and our relationships. We need to see this clearly. We need to see that we are powerless over these things, that we can't get rid of them ourselves. And somewhere along the line in our fifth step, we're going to need to come to the conclusion that we need to take these to God, and that we cannot abide them, that we want to be freed from them, and that we are entirely ready to have that happen. And the person who hears our fifth step needs to understand this. In several instances, what I've done with people I sponsor who want to go outside for a fifth step is I write a letter to the person who's going to hear that, asking them, please, not to think I'm being officious, but here is what our fifth step is designed to accomplish. And I'm not sure whether you've had an experience with this or not, but I'm hoping that this letter might be helpful to you in terms of how you proceed. And I've always received a very positive response to that. What the Big Book says is, it's important that he be able to keep a confidence, that he fully understand and approve what we're driving at, that he will not try to change our plan. And so this fifth step is for us. This fifth step is going to save our lives, and we need to be very sure that what we're doing is following the directions that we've been given in the Big Book. Now let's go to page 75. This is a most important page. Most important. This is really a pivot point in our lives. It's certainly a pivot point in our working of the 12 steps. The third line down, first full paragraph on page 75. When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We have a written inventory and we are prepared for a long talk. What's this telling us? It's telling us that we will take our fourth step and we will use our fourth step as a guide. That we will use our fourth step to make sure that we leave nothing out. It does not say that we are going to read our fourth step. It says that we're going to use it. Now, this is the way it really works, guys. Let's say that we start out with our resentment list. Who's at the top of the list? Well, Mama's at the top of the list. Okay, what did Mama do to you which caused you to be resentful, which harmed you, which angered you, which was unfair to you? And we start talking about Mama. And pretty soon we find we're talking about Papa. And then we find we're talking about brother and sister and aunt and uncle, and maybe even grandparents, or even the second cousin 3 times removed. Somewhere along the line, we begin to realize that the mother was the trigger for a whole series of memories which come flooding out. And what we do is we just follow that train till it runs out of steam, and then we go back to see if we've missed anybody along that line. If we have, we pick them up. Let's suppose that Cousin Jane is there. Well, wait a second here. We didn't get to Cousin Jane. What did Cousin Jane to you that made you angry? Well, now, Cousin Jane may very well lead to Cousin Jane's ex-boyfriend, who was also happened to be our first grade teacher. I mean, you never know where this process of association is going to lead. But you see, what we do is we use the fourth step to make sure we don't leave anybody out. We want to be very certain that we leave no stone unturned here. So we have a written inventory. We're prepared for a long talk. I've heard people doing fifth steps. Just recently, somebody told me they did their fifth step in about 32 minutes. And I said, my gosh, that's really fast, isn't it? I would say to do it right, you better plan on 3.5, 4 hours minimum. I've done fifth steps took 3 days. You see, the thing is that you're not going to stop till you get it all out. And some people are just a little bit slower about that than others. And some people have a whole hell of a lot more story than others. And you know, it's just so you don't know. But give yourself plenty of time, and don't rush it, don't hurry it. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we're engaged upon a life and death errand. Life and death errand. Take that literally, guys. It means exactly what it says. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. Now, this big book is an incredible document. I remember years and years ago I was doing the big book study for the Sober on South Beach group. And we studied the big book together for 3 years, every Wednesday night. And there was a lady in that meeting one night who was just visiting from New York. She said something which I've never forgotten. She held up her hand and she made a couple of comments, and then she said, "This big book is just so dense." And she didn't mean that it was dense in the sense of being unintelligible. She meant it was so compact. Notice something here. The entire fifth step is encapsulated in one sentence, with 2 little words in the next sentence which are kind of thrown in. For example, the whole 10th step, when we get there, is encapsulated in 6 sentences. 6 lines, that's all. That's the whole 10th step. In spite of what you hear around the rooms, the whole 10th step is just 6 lines. Let's see what this one line is. We pocket our pride and go to it. After all, the big book recognizes that our pride is the primary thing standing in our way of sitting down and getting honest and truthful and thorough with somebody. Pocket our pride and go to it. Illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Go down one more line, those 2 words, withholding nothing, should be added. Now, what is it saying to us here? Is this saying we are to sit here and talk about all the goody stuff that we did, and we really didn't mean to do these bad things, and we had a wonderful idea of how we wanted to live our life, and our intentions were so wonderful, and we helped people across the street, and we were Eagle Scouts? Does it say anything at all about all of the good stuff that we can dig up about ourselves? No. Wonder why? I guess the answer is pretty simple. Is the good stuff killing us? No, of course not. What are we looking for here? It's this bad stuff. This is what's killing us. What's this fifth step all about? It's not an autobiography orally delivered. We're looking at every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past, withholding nothing. You see, there is a whole cult now which has sprung up. I don't know where the heck it came from, which teaches us that we're supposed to soften the blow for these poor newcomers who are working their steps. We can't let them get too upset about things, because after all, the whole idea here is to feel good. I said that to a lady the other day down at the upper room. She said, that sounds to me like all you're talking about is feel-good stuff. And she said, well, isn't that what AA is all about? I said, I don't think so. I really don't think so. We're not concerned here with softening the blow. Why would we be? And I hear all this stuff. My sponsor is such a sweet lady, and she's so kind and gentle. And after I told her these terrible things about myself, what she said to me was, oh, honey, you haven't done anything. Wait till I tell you what I did. You know, and I would have to say to that lady, but this isn't your fifth step. You know, what the hell are you butting in here for? And why is it so necessary that your little darling not realize the enormity of the crap she pulled? Because she's required, by following these directions, to illuminate every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past, because these are the things that are killing her. Please, let's not short-circuit this whole process. Let's let it play itself out as it's designed to do. Because by doing that, this lady, this sponsee of yours is going to have a most marvelous revelation. Now then, the rest of this paragraph is just absolutely marvelous for meditating on. As a matter of fact, let's take a look. There are 3 paragraphs, well actually 2 paragraphs plus what we call the promises, plus another paragraph on page 85. Now all 4 of these paragraphs, I'll tell you where they are: 63, 75, 83, 84, and 85. Now all of these paragraphs deal with what is going to happen to us. These are all paragraphs jammed full of promises. And as a matter of fact, you can even add the paragraph at the bottom of page 87, top of page 88, again some promises. And they all come back to the same thing, that we're going to have a complete change here. We're going to be restored to sanity. Our minds are going to be straightened out. That we're going to be able to live life now on life's terms. That we're going to come close to God and feel His closeness. That we're going to depend upon Him in all things. That we're going to enter the world of spirit. We're going to become God conscious. We're going to be restored to sanity. We're going to have a spiritual awakening. Let's see what this one says, page 75. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye And we've been running around with our heads down for years. We no longer need to do that. You know what's going to be so wonderful is we're going to suddenly realize that we're standing on our own 2 feet. That we've come to recognize the worth that God built into us when we were born. He gave us worth. We are not some insignificant nothing floating around in the cosmos. We have value. Our spirit has value. Think about it. If you went down to the beach and took 1 grain of sand away from the beach, it would never be the same beach again. Now, we may be small, but we are important parts of God's plan and God's universe. And He loves us. And we need to come to a point where we recognize our worth. You know what happens, guys? So many people fail in here because they never come to the point where they are willing to say, I no longer wish to have my spirit disposed of on the garbage heap of life. I'm going to do whatever it takes to avoid that. They never reach that final conclusion that will lead them to doing the things they must do to change. So we can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. How many times have you been able to do that before you walk through that door? Didn't we frantically raced out there to find diversions? Or we sank ourselves into the TV? Or we did something, but we could not sit there and just be by ourselves. And now we can. Our fears fall from us. Direct promise. Let's go back. In the 4th step, what did we do? We wrote down our fears. And we wrote down what caused them. And we asked God to remove them. And the big book tells us at once we commenced to outgrow fear. Now here in the 5th step we have admitted our fears. And we have completed the triangle. And now our fears fall from us. Please don't let anybody tell you that God doesn't do this. It is always going to be true that the world and all of its people will continue to threaten us, and fear will come up from time to time. But the fears we walked in here with are gone. And if they're not gone, there's something you didn't do right. And the only way that's not going to happen is if you doubt God. If you doubt that He's going to do this for you. And we're going to talk a lot about this next week when we look at the 6th and 7th steps. The 6th and 7th steps are those steps where we need to concentrate on the faith which we have developed over the first 5 steps. Rather than the doubt. Rather than the cynicism. Rather than the sneering, laughing behind our hand, saying, oh, well, you know, God doesn't take all these away. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. When we get to the 10th step, we will have entered the world of the Spirit and we will have become God conscious. Here in the 5th step, we are already experiencing that. Many of us have a wonderful God buzz from this step. We feel it. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. What does that mean? Go back to the 2nd chapter. What's the solution? The solution is to have a spiritual experience. That translates in the 12th step into spiritual awakening. It's the same thing. Bill never used the term spiritual awakening. It was added by the committee. They changed the 12th step from spiritual experience to spiritual awakening because they thought it was more descriptive. Here in the 5th step, the term spiritual experience means precisely that. We have begun to awaken spiritually. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. When we get to the 10th step, we're going to find that it is gone. It has been removed from us. The problem has been solved. And that we haven't even sworn off, because nowhere in the big book does say don't drink. That would be stupid to tell an alcoholic who can't not drink, don't drink. Why would we do that? It tells us find God. That God will take away our obsession to drink alcohol if we seek Him. And we seek Him by working the steps. It's so simple, guys. It's so simple. Just do it. We feel we're on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. Now, all of these things are there for us when we do our 5th step. But not if we screw around with it. Not if we go off on all these tangents. All that's required is that we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every dark cranny of the past, every twist of character and every dark cranny of the past, withholding nothing. That's it. And as we come out of this 5th step, we will have already decided, number 1, that our defects of character killers, they're cancerous. Number 2, that we can't get rid of them ourselves. Number 3, that we can no longer abide them. We want to be free of them. Number 4, that God can restore us to sanity and take away these defects of character. And number 5, that we're willing to let Him do so. That's the 6th step. That's why the 6th step says we were entirely ready. It doesn't say we made ourselves ready. Because the 6th step is a gift that comes to us because we do our 4th and 5th steps properly. Nothing more, nothing less. Anything in other literature to the contrary notwithstanding, read the big book and you will see that that's exactly what it tells us. We were entirely ready. And how much time do we waste on silliness, putting quarters in parking meters, brushing our teeth with our left hand and driving the speed limit, and God knows what else. We'll have more to say about that next week. I promise you. Okay, now we come to the last paragraph on page 75. This is a segue from the 5th step into the 6th and 7th steps. By the way, you may not know it yet, but you will know it by the time we finish next week. The 5th step, 6th and 7th steps are all done on the same day. Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. This is the only time limit in the big book. Carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? And all of that means simply we review it to make sure we didn't leave anything out, that we have omitted nothing, that we have done a complete job of our 4th and 5th steps in particular. There's one thing now that we need to discuss. Almost half of the people who do a 5th step will still, in spite of everything, be hiding something. And so if you're doing a 5th step with somebody, you need to ask them this. Is there anything at all that you're never ever going to tell another human being that you're going to carry to the grave with you, which is so embarrassing or so dangerous to you that you absolutely refuse to ever discuss it or admit it to anyone? You do not have to tell me what it is, but you must tell me if there is such a thing. Half of the time there will be. Now if your sponsee or whoever you're working with does not want to tell you what this is, it's imperative that they find someone to tell someone. Most of the time, it will come flooding out. Most of the time, it isn't anywhere near as horrible as it's been built up to be over the years. Most of the time, these things are in two categories, either sexual or criminal. And usually, if it is a sexual problem, it is a homosexual problem. And for some reason, we just have such horrible guilt about these things and so much fear surrounding them. If it's a criminal problem, many times it's an unresolved criminal act, something for which they might be punished. Nevertheless, these things must come out. And if not with you who are taking their fifth step, with somebody they trust. Somebody, for example, in a criminal matter who cannot be forced to testify. A minister or a doctor or a psychiatrist. But nevertheless, we must ask the question. And when that question is asked, if it's your fifth step, you better answer it. Because if you try to do this without coming clean on this one point, you've missed the whole point of the fifth step. Could very easily mean that you never recover. That's why we must ask it. Now, once having spent this hour, then we recognize that we've done all that we were supposed to do, and we've done an excellent job, and we've not left anything out. Then we're ready for the sixth and seventh steps immediately. And next week, we're going to get into those and talk about them in some detail. And I want to thank all of you so much for being here and allowing me to share this with you. And let's see, I plan to be here next week. God willing, the creek don't rise. I hope you will be too. Thank you. Our